The amber liquid burns going down, but not as much as the memory I'm about to share. You want to know about betrayal? About revenge? Pull up a chair and let me tell you about the most elaborate con I ever pulled. The one where I made my wife fall in love with a ghost. My name is Daniel, and 12 years ago I married a woman named Vanessa, who loved my ambition more than my bank account. Back then, she'd run her fingers over my calloused hands and call them working man's gold. She'd curl up in my beat-up Ford pickup after our dates, saying she felt safer there than in any luxury car. That woman died somewhere along the way, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. The transformation was gradual, like cancer. First came the subtle comments about our tax bracket, delivered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Then the Instagram scrolling sessions where she'd show me pictures of her college friends' new kitchens, their European vacations, their diamond anniversary rings. "Look what Jennifer got for her birthday," she'd say, holding up photos of earrings worth more than my truck. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in March. I'd worked late installing a commercial HVAC system, my hands still bearing the metallic smell of copper and steel. Vanessa sat at our kitchen table, perfectly manicured nails tapping against her wine glass, looking at me like I was something she'd tracked in on her shoe. "I've been thinking, Daniel," she said, not looking up from her phone. "I've outgrown this life. We've outgrown this life." "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked. She gestured vaguely at our modest but comfortable home. "This, us. I'm 34 years old, and what do I have to show for it? A husband who comes home covered in grime, driving a truck older than our marriage." The words hit like physical blows, but I kept my voice steady. "This life has been good to us. We're comfortable." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Do you know what Jennifer's husband bought her last week? A Lexus. Just because it was Thursday. When's the last time you surprised me with anything that didn't come from Home Depot?" I could have pointed out the vacation I'd been saving for, the down payment I'd been building toward the bigger house she claimed to want. Instead, I watched her scroll through more photos of other people's lives, her face glowing in the blue light of manufactured envy. The affair started 3 weeks later, though I didn't have proof until March. Vanessa joined an upscale gym downtown, not the community center where we'd worked out together for years. Suddenly, she needed new workout. Clothes, expensive ones. Her routine changed from evening sessions to lunch breaks. She guarded her phone like state secrets and started wearing lingerie I'd never seen before. I'm not a detective, but I'm not stupid either. When your wife starts talking about her trainer Marcus with a smile she hasn't given you in months, you pay attention. When she comes home from the gym glowing with an energy she used to reserve for our bedroom, you take notes. When she starts working late but her office building's parking lot is empty, you start preparing for the inevitable. The confrontation I expected never came. Instead, on a humid evening in April, Vanessa served me divorce papers with my dinner. Not literally. She was more elegant than that. But her words carried the same legal weight. "I want a divorce," she said, cutting into her salmon. "Fast and clean. No fighting, no lawyers bleeding us dry. I deserve better than this, Daniel. I deserve someone who can give me the life I want." I set down my fork, studying her face. She looked relieved, almost excited, like she was announcing a promotion instead of the end of our marriage. "There's someone else," I said. It wasn't a question. There might be. Eventually. That's not the point. "What is the point, Vanessa?" She finally looked at me directly, and I saw a stranger wearing my wife's face. "The point is that I've wasted 12 years settling for mediocre. I won't waste any more." I could have fought her. Could have exposed Marcus and the affair she thought I didn't know about. But something cold and calculating settled in my chest as I watched her excitement about leaving me. In that moment, I realized something that would change everything. Vanessa wasn't just cheating on our marriage. She was cheating on reality itself. building fantasies about the life she thought she deserved. "Whatever you want, Vanessa," I said quietly. "I just want you to be happy." She smiled then, the first genuine smile she'd given me in months. She thought she'd won. She thought I was defeated, broken, ready to hand over everything I'd worked. For just to make her happy. She was wrong. I wasn't defeated. I was inspired. If Vanessa wanted to chase fantasies, I'd give her the greatest fantasy of her life. And then I'd watch what happened when fantasies collide with reality. The game was just beginning, and she didn't even know we were playing. Corey Michaels had been tending bar at Murphy's Pub for 8 years, but his real talent was becoming other people. We'd grown up together in the same working-class neighborhood, but while I learned trades and built a business, Corey studied faces in mirrors and voices on late-night television. He'd done some local theater, a few commercials, and spent his tips on acting classes downtown. Most people saw a bartender serving drinks and flirting for better tips. I saw an artist who could become anyone he needed to be. "You're joking," Corey said when I first pitched the idea. We were sitting in his apartment above the bar, empty beer bottles forming a semicircle on his coffee table. "You want me to seduce your wife so she'll divorce you? That's either the stupidest or most brilliant plan I've ever heard." "She's already planning to divorce me," I explained. "She thinks she's trading up for a better life. I'm going to give her exactly what she wants, a fantasy so perfect she'll abandon everything real to chase it." Corey leaned back, studying my face the way he studied characters in scripts. "And when the fantasy disappears?" "She learns the difference between what you want and what you deserve." The construction of Blake Hartman took 3 weeks of meticulous preparation. We started with the basics, business cards from a fictional investment firm, complete with a downtown address that belonged to a shared office space Corey could rent by the hour. His headshots became Blake's LinkedIn profile photos, doctored to look more casual and candid. We rented luxury cars by the day, different models to suggest he owned multiple vehicles, rather than leasing them for specific occasions. The most expensive part was the wardrobe. Blake needed to look like old money, not new flash. We hit consignment shops in the wealthy suburbs, finding designer suits and watches that whispered rather than shouted their value. Corey studied the mannerisms of wealth, the way rich men walked, talked, held their phones, ordered drinks. He watched hours of interviews with successful investors, absorbing their vocabulary and casual confidence. "The key," Corey said, practicing Blake's signature in my kitchen, "is making her feel like she discovered something special. Not like I'm trying to impress her, but like she's impressed despite my modesty." We staged photographs in borrowed penthouses, Corey looking thoughtfully out floor-to-ceiling windows with the city skyline behind him. His social media presence was carefully curated. Expensive meals he didn't pay for, charity events we crashed. For photos, business meetings staged in the lobbies of 5-star hotels. Every post was designed to suggest wealth without flaunting it, success without arrogance. The first phase was surveillance. I studied Vanessa's new routine with the dedication of a scientist observing a specimen. She worked out at Elite Fitness from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays, then grabbed lunch at the cafe next door. She shopped at Whole Foods every Saturday morning, always spending too much time in the wine section. She met her girlfriends for happy hour at trendy downtown restaurants, places where she'd photograph her drinks and post them with captions about treating herself. Corey's first appearance was strategically accidental. He was leaving Elite Fitness as Vanessa was arriving, dressed in subtle workout gear that probably cost more than her car payment. He held the door for her, polite but not eager, the kind of gesture that spoke of good breeding rather than predatory interest. "Thank you," she said, and I watched from across the street as she noticed his watch, his posture, the way he carried himself like someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. "My pleasure," Corey replied in Blake's voice, slightly deeper than his own, with crisp consonants that suggested private schools and country clubs. The second encounter came 3 days later at the Whole Foods wine section. Blake was studying a bottle of Bordeaux when Vanessa approached the same shelf. They struck up a conversation about wine regions, Corey drawing on knowledge he'd crammed from sommelier websites and YouTube videos. He recommended a moderately expensive bottle. Nothing flashy, just good taste backed by quiet confidence. "You seem to know your wines," Vanessa said, and I could see the interest kindling in her eyes. "My father always said wine was one of life's few perfect pleasures," Blake replied, then smiled self-consciously. "Sorry, I know that sounds pretentious." "Not at all. It sounds sophisticated." By the time Vanessa arrived home that evening, she was different. Not dramatically, but in the small ways I'd learned to read after 12 years of marriage. She hummed while making dinner. She checked her phone more frequently. She chose her outfit for the next day with unusual care. The gym affair with Marcus began cooling immediately, though Vanessa didn't realize it yet. Her attention was shifting towards something more exciting, more promising. Blake represented everything Marcus wasn't: established, mature, offering. The lifestyle she'd been craving instead of just afternoon workouts and hurried encounters. Over the following weeks, I orchestrated chance meetings between Blake and Vanessa. He appeared at her favorite coffee shop, dressed for a business meeting that never quite materialized. They encountered each other at art gallery openings, events Blake attended because he believed in supporting local culture. Each interaction was perfectly calibrated, friendly but not pushy, interested but not desperate, wealthy but not ostentatious. The twisted satisfaction I felt watching my wife fall for another man was unlike anything I'd experienced. Every smile she gave Blake, every laugh at his carefully rehearsed jokes, every moment of excitement when she received his texts. It was all my creation. I was the author of her fantasy, the architect of her dreams, and soon I would be the destroyer of both. The beautiful irony was that Vanessa was falling in love with everything she thought she wanted in me but better. Blake had ambition without the dirt under his fingernails. He had success without the struggle. He offered her luxury without asking her to appreciate the work that created it. As May turned to June, Vanessa grew increasingly distant from me and increasingly infatuated with Blake. She started using phrases she'd picked up from their conversations, talking about market opportunities and lifestyle investments. She began subscribing to magazines she'd never read, buying clothes for a life she didn't yet live. The hook was setting perfectly. Soon it would be time to see how deep it could go. By May, Vanessa had developed a glow I hadn't seen since our honeymoon. She sang in the shower again, spent extra time on her makeup, and bought new clothes that hung in our closet like promises of a different life. When Blake texted her, she'd light up like Christmas morning. When I spoke to her, she'd barely look up from her phone. The psychological complexity of what I was doing hit me during those long summer evenings. I'd watch my wife across the dinner table, knowing she was thinking about another man. A man I had created, funded, and directed like a puppet master pulling strings from the shadows. The conversation we used to share had been replaced by Vanessa's monologues about Blake's wisdom, his sophistication, his understanding of what life could be. "Blake thinks I've been undervaluing myself," she told me one evening, twirling pasta around her fork without eating it. "He says I have too much intelligence and beauty to settle for limitations." Limitations? I kept my voice neutral, though the word landed like a slap. "You know what I mean, Daniel? We've boxed ourselves into this small life when there's so much more available. Blake sees potential in me that maybe I'd forgotten about." What she didn't know was that every insight Blake shared, every expensive gift he gave her, every romantic gesture that made her feel special, it was all funded by me. I'd sold 2 pieces of equipment from my business, taken a strategic loan against assets that wouldn't show up in divorce proceedings, and liquidated some investments Vanessa didn't know about. Every dollar Blake spent seducing my wife away from me came from my own bank account. The first expensive gift was a pearl necklace Blake presented over dinner at the city's most exclusive restaurant. "I saw these and thought of you," he said, his voice carrying just the right mix of confidence and vulnerability. "You have the kind of elegance that deserves beautiful things." Vanessa called me that night, breathless with excitement. "Daniel, you'll never believe what happened. Blake gave me these incredible pearls. I've never owned anything so beautiful." "That's nice," I managed to say. "He must really care about you." "He does. He says he's never met anyone like me." I wanted to tell her that Blake had never met anyone at all because Blake didn't exist. Instead, I said, "You deserve to be appreciated, Vanessa. I'm glad you're happy." The business trips began in June. Blake would take Vanessa to Chicago for investment meetings, to New York for cultural experiences, to Napa Valley for networking events. Each trip was carefully planned and extravagantly funded. Corey had become a master of the role, effortlessly navigating high-end hotels, expensive restaurants, and cultural events he'd researched obsessively. Meanwhile, Vanessa had completely ended things with Marcus. She told me she needed space to think about our marriage, though her thinking seemed to consist entirely of planning her future with Blake. She moved into the guest bedroom, claiming she needed time to figure things out. But I could hear her late-night phone calls through the thin walls, whispered conversations filled with laughter and promises I'd once thought were mine alone. The psychological toll was heavier than I'd anticipated. Some nights I'd lie awake questioning whether I'd gone too far, whether the elaborate deception made me as manipulative as the woman I was trying to punish. But then morning would come, and Vanessa would ignore me completely while texting Blake good morning messages, and my resolve would harden again. The most devastating scene came in early July. Vanessa and I were having what passed for dinner conversation when she brought up Blake's latest proposal. "He's offered to take care of everything," she said, her eyes bright with possibility. "The divorce, I mean. He says I shouldn't have to ask you for anything because he can provide everything I need. Isn't that romantic?" "Romantic," I repeated, tasting the word like poison. "He wants me to be free of all this." She gestured vaguely at our home, our life, our history together. "So we can start fresh. No baggage, no complications. Just us building something beautiful together." The irony was exquisite. Blake was offering Vanessa exactly what I wanted to give her. A clean exit from our marriage with no financial obligations. She thought she was escaping to a better life, but she was actually walking directly into the trap I'd spent months constructing. "That's very generous of him," I said carefully. "And what do you want, Vanessa?" She looked at me directly for the first time in weeks. "I want what I've always wanted, Daniel. I want more than this. I want a life that matches my dreams instead of limiting them. Blake can give me that life. And if he can't, he can." Her voice was absolute, unshakable faith in a man who didn't exist. "He's not like... He's different. He sees possibilities where others see problems. He creates opportunities instead of settling for circumstances." 2 days later, Vanessa asked me for the divorce. She sat across from me at our kitchen table, the same table where she'd first announced her dissatisfaction with our life, holding herself with the posture of someone about to announce a promotion. "I want to end this, Daniel. Our marriage. I want to file for divorce." I let the words hang in the air between us. "Any particular reason?" "I think we both know we've grown apart. We want different things. I've found someone who shares my vision for what life could be. Blake." "Yes, Blake." She said his name like a prayer. "He's asked me to marry him. After the divorce is final, of course. And you said yes." I said yes. She was glowing again, radiating happiness at the prospect of leaving me. "He's everything I didn't know I was looking for, Daniel. He makes me feel alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible." I nodded slowly, as if processing this information for the first time. What do you want from me? From the divorce, I mean? Nothing. The word came out quickly, proudly. Blake says I don't need anything from you because he can provide everything I could ever want. I don't want your business, your assets, alimony, nothing. I just want to be free to start my new life. That's very generous. It's fair. You built your business before we met. You deserve to keep what you worked for. She paused, then added with devastating sincerity. Besides, Blake says taking money from you would taint our fresh start. He wants to provide for me himself. I acted like the wounded but gracious husband she expected me to be. I appreciate you being so reasonable about this. I know it can't be easy. Actually, it is easy. She smiled, and for a moment she looked like the woman I'd fallen in love with 12 years ago. When you know what you want, the choices become simple. I want Blake. I want the life he's offering. Everything else is just details. The hook had set completely. Vanessa believed she was trading up, escaping a mediocre life for something extraordinary. She was willing to abandon everything we'd built together because Blake had convinced her she deserved better. Soon she would learn exactly what she deserved. The final week of July arrived like the last act of a carefully orchestrated play. Everything was in position. The divorce papers were signed. Vanessa had moved into a furnished apartment downtown to prepare for her new life, and Blake had promised to take her to Europe to celebrate their engagement. The countdown to destruction had begun. Corey and I spent hours perfecting the final phase. Blake would gradually become less available, creating mysterious business emergencies that required his immediate attention. Important deals that couldn't wait. Urgent meetings with overseas investors. The kind of high-stakes drama that made Vanessa feel she was living in a romance novel instead of a revenge story. I'm starting to feel bad about this, Corey admitted, over coffee, studying the script we'd written for Blake's final performance. She really believes in him, in us, in the whole fantasy. She believed in destroying our marriage to get it, I replied, my voice harder than I'd intended. She threw away 12 years for a man she'd known for 3 months. That's not love. It's greed dressed up as romance. The psychology of what we were doing was complex and dark. Part of me felt a twisted satisfaction watching Vanessa plan her future with Blake, buying new clothes for European trips that would never happen, researching neighborhoods where they might buy a house together. But there were moments, usually, late at night when I'd see her apartment lights still on across the city, when I wondered if I was destroying the woman I'd once loved or revealing who she'd always been underneath. Blake's availability decreased strategically. Phone calls became shorter and less frequent. Romantic dinners were canceled for urgent business meetings. Text responses grew delayed and distracted. When Vanessa complained, Blake would shower her with apologies and expensive gifts, jewelry that cost me a small fortune, flowers that filled her apartment with the scent of false promises. "I'm sorry, darling," Blake would say, using endearments that made Vanessa melt every time. "This Singapore deal is more complex than expected, but once it's closed, we'll have all the time in the world. Paris, London, anywhere you want to go." Vanessa ate it up. The busier Blake became, the more valuable she felt. She bragged to her friends about her fiancé's international business deals, his connections with European investors, the penthouse he was buying in the city center. She showed them photos of the engagement ring Blake had designed specifically for her, a ring that had cost me 3 months of profits and that she wore like a trophy of her superior choices. The final dinner was planned for Friday evening at the city's most expensive restaurant. Blake spared no expense. Champagne that cost more per bottle than most people spent on groceries, courses prepared by a celebrity chef, a private dining room with views of the city lights. It was the perfect romantic finale to their whirlwind relationship. To new beginnings, Blake toasted, raising his glass to Vanessa's radiant face. To the life we're going to build together. To us? Vanessa replied, her voice thick with emotion. To finally finding what I was looking for. Blake had become even more perfect that evening, attentive, romantic, full of specific plans for their future. He described the house he wanted to buy them in the suburbs, complete with the garden where Vanessa could pursue the photography hobby she'd abandoned years ago. He talked about the trip to Italy where they'd spend their honeymoon, the art galleries. In Florence, the gondola rides in Venice. I've never been happier, Vanessa told him, tears of joy glittering in her eyes. I never knew life could feel this perfect. This is just the beginning, Blake promised, taking her hand across the table. Wait until you see what we're going to build together. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you have everything you've ever dreamed of. The final text exchange happened Sunday evening. Blake had been unreachable all weekend, supposedly dealing with an urgent crisis involving the Singapore investors. When he finally contacted Vanessa, his messages were brief and distracted. Blake: sorry, love. Crazy weekend with the deal. Everything's falling into place perfectly. Vanessa: I've been worried sick. When can we talk properly? Blake: tomorrow. I promise. Once this is resolved, we'll never be apart again. Vanessa: I love you. I can't wait to start our real life together. Blake: soon, darling. Very soon. Monday morning, Blake Hartman ceased to exist. His phone number was disconnected. His social media accounts vanished overnight. The LinkedIn profile disappeared. The business address led to an empty office space with a for lease sign in the window. Every trace of Blake's digital existence was systematically erased, as if he'd never existed at all. Vanessa's first text to the disconnected number was confused but optimistic. Vanessa: Blake? Your phone seems to be off. Call me when you get this. The second was worried. Vanessa: Blake, I'm getting scared. Please call me. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it together. By Wednesday, panic had set in. Vanessa: I went to your office and it's empty. I called the company and they said they never heard of you. What's happening? Thursday brought desperation. Vanessa: I know you're real. I know what we have is real. Please don't disappear on me. I left everything for you. Friday's message was heartbreaking in its complete surrender. Vanessa: I'm yours. I'm free. Just like you wanted. Please don't leave me here alone. But the number was dead, and Blake Hartman had returned to the nothing from which he'd emerged. From my apartment across town, I watched Vanessa's world collapse in real time. She called in sick to work, spending her days frantically searching for any trace of the man she'd fallen in love with. She hired a private investigator who found nothing but dead ends and fake addresses. She contacted mutual acquaintances who claimed they'd never heard of Blake Hartman. The perfect fantasy had become the perfect nightmare. Vanessa had sacrificed everything real for something that had never existed at all. And somewhere in the city, sitting in a bar with his childhood friend, Daniel finally felt like the game was complete. Murphy's Pub looked exactly the same as it had 5 months ago, before Blake Hartman existed, before Vanessa discovered what she thought she deserved, before I learned how far I was willing to go for revenge. The amber lighting cast the same shadows across the worn wooden tables, and Corey was polishing glasses behind the bar with the same methodical rhythm he'd maintained for years. But everything else had changed irrevocably. So, Corey said, sliding a whiskey across the bar to me, his voice back to its normal register after months of playing Blake. She finally blocked me. Guess the dream died. We both laughed, but the sound was hollow, echoing in the empty spaces where satisfaction should have lived. The laughter of men who'd pulled off the perfect con and discovered that perfection wasn't the same thing as fulfillment. 3 weeks of blocked numbers and dead social media accounts, I said, taking a sip of whiskey that tasted like victory and ashes. She finally accepted that Blake isn't coming back. How's she handling it? Corey asked. About as well as you'd expect. She called me last weekend, drunk and crying. Wanted to know if I thought she'd imagined the whole thing. The aftermath had been brutal to witness, even from a distance. Vanessa's carefully constructed new life had crumbled with Blake's disappearance. The expensive apartment downtown became a prison of memories and unanswered questions. Her friends, initially sympathetic, grew tired of her obsession with finding a man who'd never existed. Her job performance suffered as she spent her days calling fake phone numbers and researching investment companies that had never heard of Blake Hartman. The private investigator she hired lasted 2 weeks before admitting defeat. Every lead was a dead end. Every promising clue led to more questions. Blake's existence had been perfectly crafted and perfectly erased, leaving behind only Vanessa's memories and the expensive gifts that had cost me my business savings. She figured it out, I told Corey, watching the amber liquid swirl in my glass. Not completely, but enough to know Blake wasn't who he claimed to be. The confrontation had come 3 weeks after Blake's disappearance. Vanessa appeared at my door looking like a ghost of the woman who'd demanded a divorce 6 months earlier. Her hair was unwashed, her designer clothes wrinkled and stained with tears. The confident glow that had accompanied her affair and engagement had been replaced by hollow desperation. "I know it was you," she'd said, pushing past me into the house that had once been ours. "I don't know how you did it, but I know you're behind Blake disappearing." I'd made her coffee in our old kitchen, watching her hands shake as she tried to hold the mug steady. "What do you want me to say, Vanessa?" "I want you to tell me the truth. Did you create Blake to hurt me?" The question hung between us like smoke from a fire we'd both helped start. I could have denied it, could have feigned ignorance about her. Imaginary boyfriend's sudden vanishing. Instead, I asked her something that had been burning in my chest for months. "How does it feel to get exactly what you asked for? A clean divorce, no assets, no strings attached. You're free to pursue any life you want now." Her face crumpled then, all the arrogance and superiority dissolving into raw pain. "I loved him. I loved him more than I ever loved anything." "You loved what he represented. The money, the lifestyle, the escape from the ordinary life you'd decided wasn't good enough. You didn't love Blake. You loved what you thought he could give you." "That's not true, isn't it? You knew him for 3 months, Vanessa. 3 months, and you were ready to throw away 12 years of marriage. What does that say about what you thought our relationship was worth?" She'd left without answering, but her silence was confirmation enough. Corey poured himself a drink and settled into the bar stool beside me. "Do you feel better, now that it's over?" The question I'd been avoiding for weeks demanded an honest answer. Did I feel better? Had revenge provided the satisfaction I'd imagined during those long months of planning and execution? "I feel empty," I admitted. "Like I won a game nobody was keeping score of." The truth was more complex than simple satisfaction or regret. Watching Vanessa suffer had provided moments of dark gratification, the poetic justice of seeing her realize that chasing fantasies led to nothing but emptiness. But those moments were brief, replaced by a growing awareness that I'd destroyed not just her illusions, but something essential in myself. "The worst part is that I was right," I continued. "Everything I suspected about who she'd become, everything I thought she valued more than our marriage, Blake proved all of it. She chose money over loyalty, fantasy over reality, potential over history. She showed me exactly who she was." "And who are you now?" Corey asked. That was the question that haunted my quiet evenings in the house that felt too big without Vanessa's presence. Who was I? The wronged husband seeking justice? The calculated manipulator who'd orchestrated an elaborate deception? The man who'd spent his own money to seduce his wife away from himself? "I'm someone who learned that getting what you want isn't the same as wanting what you get," I said finally. Vanessa had called one last time the previous Tuesday, 4 months after Blake's disappearance. Her voice was different, smaller, defeated, but somehow clearer than it had been in years. "I know you'll never forgive me," she'd said, "but I need you to know that I understand now. What I did to our marriage, what I valued more than what we had. Blake wasn't real, but what I felt for him was. And that feeling showed me how far I'd drifted from the person I used to be." "What are you going to do now?" I'd asked. "I don't know. Learn to live with the consequences, I guess. Learn to tell the difference between what I want and what I need." She'd paused then, and I could hear her breathing across the digital silence between us. "I'm sorry, Daniel, for all of it. For what I became, for what I chose, for making you feel like you had to do what you did to make me see it." The apology had surprised me, not because I'd expected it, but because it no longer mattered. The woman apologizing wasn't the woman I'd married, and she wasn't the woman who'd demanded a divorce. She was someone new, forged in the crucible of consequences she'd never seen coming. "You know what the real irony is?" I told Corey as last call approached. "Blake was everything I could have been if I'd focused on money instead of building something real. He had all the surface qualities she thought she wanted in a partner, but he was empty underneath, just like the fantasies she'd been chasing." "And now?" Corey asked. "Now she knows the difference between fool's gold and the real thing. Unfortunately, she learned it too late to matter. The bar was closing around us, chairs being stacked on tables and lights being dimmed. Corey and I finished our drinks in comfortable silence. Two old friends who'd pulled off the impossible and discovered it was perfectly hollow. As I walked home through streets that looked the same but felt different, I reflected on the lesson, buried in the wreckage of my marriage. Sometimes the best revenge isn't hurting someone. It's letting them run headfirst into their own fantasy and making sure the ground disappears right before they land. Vanessa had gotten exactly what she'd asked for: freedom from the limitations of our ordinary life, the chance to chase something extraordinary, the opportunity to discover what she was really worth in the marketplace of dreams. The price of that education had been everything she'd actually possessed, and somehow that felt like justice, even if justice tasted like ashes and regret. Served. In equal measure on both sides of a relationship that had died long before Blake Hartman was born and buried. The perfect con was complete. The only question left was whether anyone had actually won. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.